I'm Andrew, local resident. There's 4 extinction level events which are happening around this place within 100 k's. Start with the swift parrot down at the Rosebery. The Chinese mine wants to build a tailings dam into the Tarkine in swift parrot endangered species habitat. The only reason they're doing this is that they rejected a feasibility study, the first feasibility study that they had on raising the existing tailings dam wall and widening it. That was, okay, the first feasibility study said you can do it, no dramas, can give your mine another 10, 20 years worth of work. And yet they chose to ignore that feasibility study, went and got another engineering report and said you can't do that to the dam, yet you need a new one. So we need to hold them accountable not to be able to do that sort of thing where they can ignore the truth and go and get something that's a replacement for the truth, so they can just continue the destruction of our wilderness. Preservation is a forgotten word. Then we can go up to Robbins Island, the Hunters Islands, where there's the yellow-bellied parrot, Australian migrating bird. Those wind turbines, how many wind turbines? 270 metres tall. You know, they're going to wipe those birds out, plus the other 20 to 100,000 shorebirds that are around that area. And then also UTAS has come up with a great feasibility study of putting salmon pens right where there's the King George whiting spawning grounds. So all in all, it's just corporations after corporations wiping out what we call clean green Tassie. And the other thing with the salmon industry, do the same thing with their science as the Chinese government, how they just ignore the science and then they'll replace the science that says no, you can't do it with another scientist who says yes, you can do it, even though there's years and years and years of study of why the salmon pens are so toxic for our own environment, which stops us from getting our own fish, by the way. So who up there is on board with protecting these areas?
Show of hands.
To become
I'm definitely
wildlife refuges for the animals and for the forests.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I want to provide a voice for the voiceless, and I have actually been protesting with the Bob Brown Foundation in the forest about the proposed new tailings dam, where the masked owl is also very endangered.
Yes.
And it's something that I'm very passionate about. Yeah, and my slogan is fighting corporate greed. So the people that find all the scientists to say what they want them to say, just so they can do what they want to do, fighting that.
Yep, good.
Sorry, I was just going to say profit should never come before care, and that includes care of our elderly, care of our wilderness, and care of our environment.
Yep.
I was just going to say, just with MMG and what's going on down there, I think I really understand your concern for the wilderness. I'm for that as well. I think the other side, and I'm really conflicted about this because we've got the town there that has relied on that industry for so long. So I guess what I'm saying is that we've got the human impact. If we don't go ahead with the dam, I think they've got another 2 years before that has to be, before they can't exist anymore. So
they ignored the feasibility study to say that you can widen the wall and you can raise it to give that tailings dam another 10 to 20 years of lifespan.
Right, okay, I didn't know that. I guess, yeah, I'm just trying to point out that I think we need to consider human impact and loss of potential jobs. There's a whole town there that we need to care for.
There's more humans than swift parrots.
Yes, you're right.
So I'd rather protect the swift parrot at this
yeah,
stage.
You'd rather, yes, I agree.
But the other thing is, it's not just a tailings dam. They're putting a whole processing plant over there. And the river is the last physical barrier before they get into the Tarkine. If they get over that river and develop that processing plant there, then the Tarkine's going to be open slather. And it's the last temperate rainforest that we have.
Yeah.
So a lot more should be put into, rather than profitability and the mines.
Definitely.
Do what the first feasibility study said, increase that dam, existing dam, and leave the wilderness to the wilderness, because that's going to be our draw card, not the mines. In another.
As for the wind farms, I know there's been a lot of concern over the wind farms, and personally, and Jackie's party, we don't agree with the wind farms up there on Robbins Island. There's a whole area down in Wellback Ridge which has much less impact. There's no one down there.
Yes, yes.
So that would be a much better option, and I believe that it's been stalled for a couple of years, so we need to get that fixed.
Yes, yes.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, Greens, I want to make this really clear. Greens are totally in support of ethical, environmentally sustainable mining for the minerals of the future that we need to electrify our industry and our vehicles. We are not in support of mines that are doing that to the detriment of our environment that sustains us physically, and that, as you say, the Tarkine area, 7 out of 10 World Heritage Valleys, as according to the National Heritage Council, and Cradle Coast Authority did modelling on making that a national park back in early 2000s, and there was hundreds of direct jobs with that and significant economic benefit to the community. So we don't support the MMG's tailings dam within the Tarkine area, which is north of the Pieman River. We have always said we are in support of the mine continuing and those jobs continuing, with more jobs making it more environmentally sustainable into the future. They can do that south of the Tarkine, and probably even better, from my understanding, world's best practice for mines tailing is actually use paste infill. And I know, my small business is down there. I've spoken to a couple of engineers from MMG, and they say they've had paste experts in there recently. So let's hope that they see the light and look after our environment and continue to provide jobs. But mind you, let me say, those mines pay very little royalties back to our government in Tasmania in comparison to mainland mines, so that needs to be looked at as well. Robbins Island, I don't know if you've seen the aerial photos of the island, and the wetlands there is absolutely spectacular and amazing. Threatened species, migratory birds, the seagrasses there are protected, endangered. We are totally in support of renewable energies, but they must be in appropriate areas that do not impact our environment more and cause more detriment. As we say, there's lots more areas that we can be doing that. So no to that as well. No wind farms there where we need to be protecting that area. There's a big campaign to have that listed as a Ramsar wetland, which it has already met the criteria for. And that brings economic benefits from international monies if its RAMs are listed. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, questions like that are essentially why the Animal Justice Party exists. We are here to represent those creatures that are being wiped out by human progress, and we need to make sure that we are implementing systems that will continue to enable us to have a wild Tasmania, which will benefit all of us as well as the animals that live here. And we should be putting ourselves into a position where we stop this system of coming to the very end of something and then forcing us to choose between jobs or environment. We need to start making smooth transitions which we can implement over the next decade to get away from these situations continuing where we end up having to make that tough choice. The reality is we know these things are coming, we can see them coming, and we should be fixing them before they become an immediate problem rather than now when we have to. That's my thoughts anyway.
Craig?
It's the little things that matter. You know, the pulp mill, for instance, out here, which was killing the fish larvae. Most pelagic fish larvae is 0.3 of a mil. That pulp mill was killing the larvae as quick as it was being produced. That's what knocked off our curta fishery. That's not what knocked off our whiting, reduced them to a small amount of numbers. All we've done there is taken that pollution away from that waterway. Whiting building up, snapper building up, cuttlefish building up out here. The shy albatross, they found a spike in the albatross diet of cuttlefish just recently. They came to me and said, why is that? And I told them why. They've been building up between Wynyard and Somerset. And over spring, July, August, you'll see clusters of white birds feeding on the cuttlefish there. So it's very simple. It's either good or bad practice. And we have the knowledge and the history behind us now to know what is good and what is bad. And generally what I've found, all these projects and grandmaster projects that have been introduced without any skin at the table are all of a corrupt nature. Everything that's impacting us, our culture, our environment, I can guarantee you there's money changing hands behind the scenes for that project to get where it was. Robbins Island, for instance, they wanted to list that for a Ramsar listing in 2001. The council, in conjunction with the island owner, ran a campaign, a fear campaign. Oh, if they protect this, you won't be able to access your fishing rights, so it'll close down the oyster industry. Well, guess what? The exact opposite occurred somewhere else in Australia, one of these Ramsar listings. A whole host of cottage industries came with that. The funding to revegetate our streams and prevent the degradation was put forward. We've missed out on millions of dollars because one fella and a few others with this project in mind ran a campaign to put the fear into everyone, and over the last 20 years we've missed out on millions that would have come into that community. We would have had cottage industries there. So yeah, good and bad practice, and once again, the corruption. That is where it's all coming from, I can guarantee you. So that's what we have to deal with as a nation, and Braddon, we're the biggest swingers in the country.
Gunslinging, all good.
Now we have to stop swinging and put your vote behind one as a collective, and you watch how quickly you will get what we need, what we want, and our youth and our future, you know. A lot of us have had the benefit of having everything possibly given to us that we could possibly want, and that's why we're sitting here today to put back and give back, and that's what we have to do. Give back and give back to our youth, give them access to our fisheries, give them access to our forestry, train them up, get them out in the workplace if they're showing a bit of aptitude at high school. That gives more time to spend on other students, you know, so that's how it was, that's how it worked, and that's what we have to get back to.
Right, thank you. Right, I've got a couple of people still lined up for questions.
Yes, thank you for everyone. Kim, live around here. There's something about transparency which seems what everyone has brought up as so important. And this is a little bit of a question towards the Lib Dems, but also anybody. So one thing that came up was this idea of violence. And so I'd really like this address of the violence of financial capital. You know, the violence of financial capital is what leads to what everything Craig is talking about, these destructions on what is happening in our environment in a place like Braddon. Now, the things we hold true here are the things, because we don't live in this highly developed civilization, you know, we live closer to nature. And so my question is, you know, the people on this panel, in what way will they advocate for a different way of viewing the world that comes from an ethics that's based around looking after human and non-human forms, and that combats and educates people on the relationship of violence and capital? Thank you.
Who'd like to respond to that one?
I can address that because it's Lib Dems. Yeah, so our approach really, I suppose we would sort of point out that a lot of the environmental issues sort of come about because of twisted incentives of like public ownership of things. So like if a government has a lot of land, there's an incentive for corporations to come and not necessarily purchase that land and look after it, but they will consume it. They'll be happy to mine it perhaps. So there's the tragedy of the commons. So what would we do to stop the corporations taking over? We wouldn't give them a government to run, basically.
We've given them a foreign investment for them, but bloody well taken over them. Well, they haven't.
It just seems to me that the government sometimes is the little thin line between, you know, between this thing where it becomes total annihilation. I mean, we know that corporations, the bottom line is is the shareholder values, and you know, like these things are not going to just be solved by just stripping away government powers. You know, of course, there's a state capital nexus that operates all the time, but if we keep just giving more to the capital, you think that the Tarkine is going to survive? I mean, this is what capital is driving. You know, those tailing stands, the death of those, the swift parrot. You know, that will kill the swift parrot. I can guarantee you, because capital has no interest in the swift parrot.
So just with that, I mean, this in the context of this federal election, we do support the locals governing and making their own decisions. So we don't, we want to, if that's what the state government and even the Braddon government, if we were involved in politics on the state level, we would want the Braddon area, and that goes all the way down to the individual as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Feel free to.
And just quickly with that question as well, I feel that something I brought up earlier about the government agencies and organisations are actually doing their job properly, and they are corrupt. So we're seeing a lot of problems up here, especially with the environment, etc. A lot of people bringing up environmental problems that actually should have been and dealt with the government already with the EPA and the RSPCA, but they just hadn't dealt with it because they have been corrupted with certain issues, or they have turned a blind eye to issues. So it's come up, you know, it's come to this point now where we're blaming government this and that, but there's people within government agencies that are just not doing their job properly, and that's why they've allowed these corporations to take over the government. And at the moment it feels like, the corporations do more talking than have more voice than what you do. So that's, again, I know the Liberal Democrats, myself, and there's some other parties up here that do believe that your voice is actually more important to the corporates. I believe when the corporates come into Australia, they should be paying their fair share of taxes. There's 8 corporate companies that should be paying a lot more taxes that then could fund other projects that we could actually do as well. So I think, have a look at the corruption within our own government, then we can actually get some of these things done, because they're turning a blind eye to a lot of these things and allowing the corporations to get away with it.
Yeah. Before we hear from Fenella, we've just got one of our candidates unfortunately has to leave, so thank you, Scott, for attending. Anyone else need to head off? I know we're going a little bit over time, so no, all good.
Thanks very much, and good luck, Craig.
Does anyone else want to speak on corruption before we go to a couple more questions? Just quickly, let's keep it.
Just a quick comment, Kim. State capture is something we've been talking about, where corporations, bodies give political donations and expect kickbacks and have then great access for their lobbyists. It's happening with housing, it's happening with native forests, it's definitely happened with climate change for decades, and Greens have been very early adopters out there kind of arguing against this. But the scary thing is it's also happening from our health system, from social housing, from education, where corporations are getting their way and getting things privatised, and public funds diverted to private sources, private interests, which is not investing in community. So we look forward to really ensure that we invest in community rather than give it away to private organisations.
Thank you. And a couple more questions from the floor.
Hi everyone, my name's Angel Courtney and I'm currently a student at UTAS and I'm studying education. So my question is, do your parties have policies on wiping/assisting student debt? The reason for my question is because I'm currently at university, I've had the pleasure of meeting heaps of individuals from different backgrounds. Unfortunately, because of the cost of living, etc., they have had to drop out of uni. So I've had about maybe 13 friends drop out of uni because they're no longer able to afford it. So I was just wondering what your opinions are.
Yep.
I'd like to address that question. One of the UAP parties is that we will be making tertiary education free and forgiving prior debts for HECS, etc. Reason being is an education, the way I see it, is an investment into a person's livelihood. Nothing like distracting me.
Water.
You're right in the middle of that one. An education is an investment into your future, basically. You go from potentially being a low-income earner who's struggling to get an education and you want to better yourself, even just looking at a TAFE course that costs you thousands, you go to university, it could cost you $20,000 to $30,000, right? Now, you go to university, you come out, and all of a sudden you go from a low income to middle, upper income. Therefore, that improves the quality of your life, your family's life, your children's life. Also, as any good return investment, the government will also seek higher taxes from you over the 30, 40 years of your career. So anybody knows that an education is an investment. And so that's why it's one of our policies to bring that back, because there's a lot of people. I looked at the ABS statistics in Tassie, and the percentages of young people or people in general that have gone on to university is amongst the lowest in the country. And so I believe that Tasmania would really benefit from having free tertiary education at TAFE and university.
Yep.
Thank you.
Kieran.
Hey. Yeah, so I wanted to say a couple of things. A, we've had free university in this country before, and there's no reason we can't do it again. B, you're correct, it is good for the economy. Everyone should be able to get an education if they so desire. University needs to be looked at in a lot of different angles recently. I've got to say, $20K for a bachelor's degree, that's super optimistic these days, but hopefully we can get it back down to that cost at least. The other thing that I wanted to point out is it's not just the cost of university, it's also things like welfare system, which enable people to survive while studying. I myself had to drop out of university because I couldn't work full-time in security and also study comp sci at the same time. We should be looking at making sure that our Centrelink system is not giving people enough money to die slowly, but instead giving them enough money to live while they study.
Yep, Darren?
Yeah, basically you should be given all the assistance under the sun. Education is everything, and particularly for our youth, and particularly in the world where we're going today, we need to put back basically and give those that don't have it what they need. Free TAFE and education, the general education, we have to have the discussion, what are we educating our youth for? What are the needs? Yeah, but a real focus on our youth. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah, so whatever money, whatever assistance, and it should be forthcoming. And because of the nature of Braddon, we're a bit different everywhere else. So allow for that.
Yep, got Darren and Fenella, and then Lynn.
Yeah, Angela, you're our future, so you're worth investing in, there's no doubt about that. And we're a rich country, as these guys are saying, we can afford it. I was fortunate enough to go through a very cheap education system. Education underpins our success, there's no doubt about that, whether it's an apprenticeship, your TAFE, university, work-based training. Our Greens policies are really strong in this area for free uni, TAFE, education and wiping student debts currently as they are. They're all funded by their independent parliamentary office. But also we've got other policies that support people to go through education, and that includes, like you're talking about, like livable wages. So we want to see that benefits for not just for students but disability recipients and welfare recipients that are over the poverty line of $88 a day minimum, and also policies on childcare and things to help people to go back and get educated and things. So thanks for asking that, and you're doing well.
Fenella.
Just quickly, I mean, it's outrageous that the Scott Morrison-led government has increased arts degrees to be matching other degrees, like they're more expensive, and I would support free tertiary education.
And Lynn.
I agree with everything everyone has said up here, and I just think education should be free for everybody.
Great.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question? Of course, the candidates are, all have websites or social media, so there will be, no doubt, lots of other questions you'll have. We've got another 2 questions from the audience, so we might say that's the last, unless there's something really pressing. But of course, you can follow them up after the forum, and some of them might be hanging around as well, so feel free to ask them after the event. 2 more from the floor.
I'd just like a few thoughts on your thoughts on the treatment of a fellow Australian, Julian Assange. Yeah.
Yep.
What was the question? Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just like a few comments or thoughts of the treatment of a fellow Australian, Julian Assange? Is that a valid?
I actually had the privilege of being invited, and I met John Shipton and his son Gabrielle, the entire film crew on the 26th of April at the Tram Shed. If you haven't seen the film, I suggest you get out and see it. It's called Ithaca, and it's a story of Julian's life. John does an amazing job at telling the story of what has happened with Julian and the interference with the governments, and it's actually a very heartwarming, heartfelt story, and it's the kind of documentary that really gets to your heart and you do tear up in it, because at the end of the day that's another human being who's done his job as a journalist. You've got a man who's 76 who's trying to get his son home, and they did discuss about the number of politicians all around the world. I think there's 30 in Australia who are signed up and on board with getting Julian home. Here's the Green Senator Peter Whish-Wilson. He was one of the original, along with Andrew Wilkie, who started off the process of highlighting the issues of Julian Assange. But I definitely support freeing Julian, and I would strongly encourage this government to get on the phone, ring up Boris and get him out of Belmarsh prison before they extradite him over to the US, because he's an Australian son, he needs to come home. Thank you.
I absolutely concur with that. I was also lucky enough to meet Julian's father and brother at the Tram Sheds for the video screening they had. And Julian's father actually gave me a free Julian Assange sash, which I almost wore today, but I did tell him if I get sworn into Parliament, I'll proudly wear it then. I asked Dick Smith if we could borrow his helicopter to go break out Julian Assange, and while he didn't lend me the helicopter, he did say he was pro-Julian. I'm very passionate about bringing him home. You just have to look at my Twitter feed to see that. I've been tweeting ScoMo, Joe Biden and Priti Patel, everyone I can get my mitts on, trying to get it out there to bring him home.
Darren Briggs. Yep, Darren.
Me, sorry. Yeah, thanks. What these guys are saying is great and amazing. This guy is a Walkley Award winner for what he did, which is a prestigious journalism award. Yet that has not been recognised, obviously, and he's been criminalised for that. This is totally against his human rights, and it's preventing us. It goes back to this corruption of we're not hearing the truth. John Howard brought home David Hicks, you might remember, from Guantanamo Bay. So there's nothing stopping Scott Morrison bringing Julian Assange home. And the Greens are really proud to have been involved with a lot of that work to bring that out. I didn't see the movie, so I'm glad you guys saw it. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
Duncan, did you have something to say?
Only that we also support freeing Julian and Assange. It's in our Freedom Manifesto that's what we want to do.
Okay.
Any other Party also supported the freeing of Julian Assange. It won't be an easy fight. There is a lot of diplomatic process about it, but it has to be prioritised for Australians, so all Australians' rights are protected, because Julian Assange did nothing wrong. To be arrested where he is now and to be held captive overseas like that is actually illegal, and we need to protect all Australian rights, including Julian Assange, and use him as an example to bring him home.
All right. Did you want to say something, Kieran?
Yeah, I just want to go quick. Agree with everything so far, obviously. I just want to say I work in cybersecurity and data privacy, so there's a lot more about this conversation that I would love to get into. We probably don't have time for, but I do think it's important to note that this is a primary example of governments abusing their power to silence people who question them, and that is unacceptable. We've got a lot of people up here who are passionate about freedom of speech, which is great, and this is something that we should absolutely be championing it for.
Yep. Okay, and we've got another question behind you there.
Yeah, I was just about to answer. Sorry, Corey.
Single-handed.
I think it's a snapshot moment, really, for all Australians. Like, Julian is an Australian citizen. Now, how confident are you going overseas and being put in a situation where a country has detained you? And also the disrespect to us generally. I think it's a watershed moment. They can show that they've turned around by freeing that man up, and that will give all Australians a bit of confidence in who's governing this country and looking after our best interests.
Can I just add one thing? When they played this film, there was conversations on the phone with Julian, and when you sit there and you listen to Julian, that guy, or that man, he's 23 hours a day in a confined cell. He gets very little time out, and just the sound of his voice, he is absolutely broken. I don't know how much he's got left in him, and he is on suicide watch. And I think that's when you listen to his voice, you know it's real. And when you listen to John's voice, you know how real it is. And anybody that's a parent would do anything to fight to get your son or daughter home again. And we need to get him home.
Okay, thank you. One last question from the floor. Thank you.
The World Economic Forum is a body that has appointed itself to tell us all how we should live, where we should live, what we should do. Darren, Sarah Hanson-Young is a member of the World Economic Forum's School for Young Leaders. First question, what is your view on that organisation and its role and the acceptance of the Greens of a member of their party being involved in that? For the rest of you, where do your allegiances lie? Where do you think our government's allegiances should lie?
So, Darren Briggs, can you respond to that on behalf of the Greens?
Thanks, mate. Not sure what your name was. Thanks, Simon. Look, I am no economic expert at all. I would be leaving that to experts. I'm not even sure, I wasn't sure of Sir Hanson-Young there, so I'd have to get back to you on that, I'm afraid. All I would say is that from an economic point of view, we believe that from the ground up, economic support works far better, as it did in COVID with JobSeeker and JobKeeper, to stimulate the local economy and to give people healthcare, food, housing. Like I saw that in my patients from them receiving increased benefits. A mate had kids coming to school that had lunchboxes filled again. So that's our approach to economic stimulus in general. I'll get back to you on that. Can you contact me and I'll find out.
Sophie?
Oh, yeah, I don't know too much about that forum either, but yeah, as Darren was saying, I guess the approach that we have is from an economic point of view is infrastructure, education, healthcare, getting the basics right, and that will stimulate the economy, and that's where we will focus our energies.
Yep. Anyone else?
Well, from what I've heard, the World Economic Forum, this school that's putting through all the young leaders, they're kind of brainwashing them all just to support the corporations, take away our personal freedoms, and basically sodomise us all while we sleep. So I think our government should be standing for the people and not for the owners of wealth and power.
Yep. Anyone else?
Answer your question, run like hell. Seriously, there is nothing good about the World Economic Forum. When you've got a person like Klaus Schwab running the place and he's talking about putting chips in your brain, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. I mean, today, Albo puts out in the presser 40%, help out with paying off your home by 40%. So therefore, basically, their idea is that they're going to help you get into a home. Now, anyone with any economic knowledge where you saw it with the first home buyers grant, as soon as they started throwing out tens of thousands of dollars, what happened? The development costs went through the roof, all the other costs went through the roof, etc. So if old Elbow gets in and starts giving 40% towards the cost of the house, it's going to make that house cheaper for everybody. That will automatically drive the cost of housing up again further, and it's just called artificial inflation or artificial increasing of the prices, right? I do not support the World Economic Forum, and I do not support not much that comes out of there. Sorry, I had to be careful what I was going to say. I'm very, very cautious of the World Economic Forum and basically who they control, the monies, the companies like Vanguard, who have trillions of dollars in investments around the world. I'm very concerned.
Okay, we do have, what we might do is we'll allow the candidates just quickly maybe to show sign of hands, because we are running out of time. If it's a bit hard, do you support the World Economic Forum? Yes, put your hand up. Okay, that is a pretty quick show of
I feel like we need
there.
an opt-out for this option though, because if it's just support or against, there are people who probably don't have an opinion either way.
Yeah, okay. So we'll just have one last question from the floor, and we'll finish up after that. Yes.
Now I'm all nervous. I'm concerned that our Parliament has passed that an army, I think it might be the United Nations, can come in and take over and do whatever they like to us. And again, I'm not too sure who that army is, whether it's the New World Order or whatever. At any stage, if there's a pandemic, they can come in and do what they like to us. That is my biggest concern. And thank goodness somebody has spoken about the World Economic Forum, because yes, I am also very concerned about Klaus Schwab and his cronies.
Did anyone want to speak on that before we close up, particularly? Anyone want to speak on that?
Quickly, it's a great question, and like before, I'll raise my concerns over the United Nations and the World Health Organisations and the World Economic Forums and all these international bodies that are trying to take over our actual government itself. I do believe that the United Nations does have some sort of permission, because we are signed over to them, that they can actually come into our country and act accordingly, you know, without us being involved in it, because we are actually signed into their agreement. So yes, the United Nations can actually come into our country and probably take the streets if we don't do what they want to say. So I'm concerned about that. I wouldn't actually have any international body have that sort of power over our country at all. So absolutely, you have very right to be concerned.
They already have that power.
Especially in the last couple of years and what we've seen, our own police and the way they've acted by locking up our own people, it's very scary to think that now that we can actually have an army come into our country and do some seriously locking people up. You know, you just don't want them to have that power in the first place. Okay, so that's a definite no, yes. Thank you for the question.
They actually already have that power. It's the Biosecurity Act. Has anyone read the Biosecurity Act? Anyone frightened? Yep. Very frightened. Basically, they can just come into your house, do whatever they bloody well want. You know, that's not a democracy as far as I'm concerned. And so the fact that they can already do that, and on suspicion that you've got a, you know, virus or whatever it may well be, they can already do it. So that authority is already here. They don't need no external military or armies. They've already got that authority and power.
And Keown?
Just a minute, just on that house of people coming into my house, I want in Tasmania to be able to defend myself. Up to a point, isn't it? It's only I can do... someone's attacking you, you need to defend yourself. If someone's coming to your home, you have the advice, you need to defend your home. But it's up to a certain point, isn't it? Yes.
Probably a discussion.
Well, how would you like to defend
time?
yourself? In what way? What are you saying? Would you like guns back or something like that? Or
Yes,
what are you saying?
I'd certainly bring back the gun law, that we could all have our guns to defend ourselves.
Okay, we're just going to move on from that statement, because there'd probably be people in the audience that probably just hear from Keown.
I'm not convinced it's not a can of worms. I think we need to be cautious about the fears that we have. It is reasonable to be afraid of things like this, but can I just clarify, you said the Biosecurity Act has already given the UN rights to come into my house?
I didn't say that.
Okay, my apologies, I must have misheard that. So you were saying that they, being our government, right, okay, sorry, that was just a bit of an honest misinterpretation. All right, so we've got a couple of things here. We've got the Biosecurity Act, which is an Australian piece of legislation which gives powers to our government to control us in certain ways based on fears of a pandemic. We've got a charter from the World Health Organization, which hasn't even gone into draft stage yet. At the moment, it's expected to hit draft by 2024. So right now, obviously, we had questions about that earlier, but it's very hard for us to give you well-reasoned opinions on that legislation or that treaty, which hasn't actually been written yet. I think at the moment we've had a rough couple of years, and it's very easy to get people very worried about our freedoms and liberties being taken away from us. I'm not convinced that the World Economic Forum has any power over you as an individual citizen. And if you're saying that there is legislation that does enable that, I'd be very interested to see it.
Okay, we'll just allow Darren Briggs to finish us off with one more comment.
Guys, I was just going to say science and evidence. World Health Organization, amazing work in many countries preventing health and disease, from basics like, providing clean food and water, let alone pandemic responses. United Nations peacekeeping forces, which to my knowledge are mainly peacekeeping without arms, which have helped with many places around the world that have been invaded and genocides have happened. I think working together in collaboration with organisations like that, which are based on peace, science and evidence, is a safe way to go.
Okay.
And I wouldn't want to see, there was a mention of guns and things. Australia has one of the most safest places as far as gun harm goes. Our laws are amazing, and from health and safety point of view, we must maintain that.
Okay. All right, well, I think that finishes up for the evening, so thank you very much for coming. And like I said earlier, all the candidates no doubt have websites or social media accounts. You can follow them up, and I'm sure a few of them will be staying after this. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.